Earlier in the show, I spoke about Joe Biden's train wreck of an interview on 60 Minutes in the US. But there was one thing he said in his opening ramblings that was actually important. Here it is.
So unlike Ukraine, to be clear, sir, U.S. forces, U.S. men and women would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion.
Yes.
Okay, this is the fourth time he's made such comments, and every time the White House has insisted the policy remains, quote, strategic ambiguity towards Taiwan. But to me, surely there's no coming back from a statement as strong as what Biden uttered. Joining me now is Michael Shoebridge from Strategic Insights Australia. Michael, welcome. I'm really keen on getting your thoughts because what does strategic ambiguity mean, and is it now a thing of the past, or is it the continuing policy of the US?
Well, Cory, you're right. When the US president says something repeatedly and simply and clearly like Biden has, yes, the US would come to Taiwan's aid if China attacked it. That's big news. But at the same time, the State Department and the White House have both still insisted that US policy of strategic ambiguity hasn't changed. I think this is actually doing a great job of messing with the minds in Beijing, really getting inside the head of someone like Xi, because no doubt they're confused, but the good thing is they're getting a clear message from Biden that Beijing has failed to politically isolate Taiwan.
Well, it's fascinating. Do you think there was a coded message as well to perhaps the Taiwanese saying, yes, we'll be there to help you, you can rely on that, but maybe a bit of get your house in order as well?
Yes, I think, it's not just the Taiwanese that have to get a bit more like the Ukrainians. We do too here in Australia. We can't just rely on a big, powerful friend like America to do all the heavy lifting for us. That's certainly a message Biden and the US administration are sending to Taiwan, but I think they're sending it to other partners and allies too. Be like Zelensky. Be able to use military power yourselves, and then we will help you.
And is there any message then in Biden's comments to the power balance in the South Pacific? I mean, we know that China is trying to befriend a lot of island nations, smaller nations there, exert military dominance or force, diplomatic force. Do you believe that Biden is sending a coded message to those nations as well?
Well, I think that there is a strong message that the US is a Pacific power and the US has no intention of not being a Pacific power. This is a Chinese narrative to tell the world and themselves that America is only in the Pacific by choice. Well, it's got a massive Pacific coastline, and statements like this from Biden are a reminder to the region, that includes the South Pacific, that America is here and it's not going to isolate itself.
Yeah, it's a fascinating game of brinksmanship. I shouldn't call it a game because it's far too serious, but the US seems to be weaker than almost at any time in its recent history, both politically, it's got internal divisions. China, I'm sure, has a lot of its own problems, which are less public and less publicised. If it came to a military conflict, is America still in a superior position over the Chinese, in your view?
I think in a wider war, yes. It's much harder if it's just a narrow conflict in and around Taiwan. Then I think the Taiwanese matter a whole lot more than we have really told ourselves. And the lesson of Ukraine is pretty clear there. The Chinese plan, I think, for Taiwan before Putin's failed war in Ukraine looked a lot like what Putin tried and failed to do to Kiev. Airborne landings to decapitate the government in Taipei, capture or kill the president of Taiwan, and have will to resist collapse. Well, that failed spectacularly for Putin in Ukraine, and Xi must be looking at his People's Liberation Army planners and saying, don't tell me that's your plan for Taiwan. So a narrow conflict is a more difficult thing. But I think what Biden is also telling Xi is, look, There's no neat, quick war of conquest in Taiwan for you. You're likely to have a wider war with America and its partners and allies, and that's bad news.
And Michael, we're out of time, but thank you, Michael Shoebridge, for joining me tonight. Really appreciate your insights.